The West is known for its history, folklore, and famous cities such as Hollywood. But sadly, darkness lurks underneath, and that'll be reflected in these grim 5 cold cases. This is Lorna Brackett. She was an extremely hard worker who was very spunky and energetic. She was truly a good person, so her death came as a surprise to everyone. Waterville police responded to a noise complaint, which isn't typical for a small town Sunday night in Maine. The complaint said there seemed to be fireworks or gunshots mixed with loud voices coming from the house next door. Police arrived at 7 Reservoir Street, but the house was quiet, so they left and went back to the police station. Now, 2 hours later, police were once again at the same home, except it was on fire. Once the firefighters put out the blazing flames, 2 bodies were found, and they were charred beyond recognition. The first victim to be identified was Lorna Brackett, who was 25 at the time. The second victim was Maynard White, who was 46 and the owner of the home, and these 2 victims were a couple. Autopsies were conducted, and it was concluded that both victims died from smoke inhalation. However, the fire was set intentionally, as an accelerant was found at the crime scene. Also, interestingly enough, Maynard might have been involved with some sketchy people. Authorities arrested 19 people on drug-related charges that claimed to know Maynard. With this in mind, police believe that the fire was set to silence Maynard, but after more than 400 interviews, they still didn't have a suspect. So sadly, the case remains unsolved and a mystery in the small town. This is Mark Dugas. He was a wonderful father and was very hardworking. He was described as a guy full of life and helpful to those around him. Well, he was, until he met his second wife. It was the evening of June 4th, about 6 p.m. A neighbor of Mark and Amy is his second wife, is startled by a frightful cry for help. This was moments before Mark entered the neighbor's home, bleeding profusely from his chest. The neighbor immediately tended to his wounds and called 911, but by the time the ambulance arrived, Mark had succumbed to his wound. Authorities arrived quickly after and questioned Amy about what happened. She said it was all self-defense. However, they noticed alcohol in her breath and arrested her for violation of bail conditions. On the way to jail, Amy tried to escape. She even assaulted an officer. What's even sadder about this case is that Amy's 7-year-old son, Chad, witnessed the whole ordeal. An autopsy was conducted the next day, and it confirmed Mark died to a major stab wound to the chest. Mark's family even spoke out about the domestic violence laws and how there should be equal consequences regardless of gender. Eventually, the case did go to trial, but even with all the evidence and the witness of the child, Amy was still ruled as not guilty. The small town was outraged. The domestic violence Mark suffered cost him his life, and yet she walked out free. The only time she got was for assaulting a police officer, and that was still a slap on the wrist. And what makes this even worse is that the cycle just repeated itself. She attacked 2 more men, William Duncan and Brian Pelletier. It was becoming extremely evident that the law was in the woman's favor when it came to domestic violence. Mark Dugas never got the justice he deserved. This is Trish Haynes. She lived with her boyfriend, Chris Hughes, in North Woodstock, New Hampshire. To be quite frank, the two had a very violent relationship, and police were involved. Then, out of the blue, Trish mysteriously goes missing. Sandy, her grandma, and her guardian last spoke to her May 16, 2018. Sandy could tell that Trish's friend, Ashley, was pressuring her to get off the phone. Little did she know that this would be the last time Trish would be heard alive. Then, out of the blue, Ashley started saying that Trish wanted nothing to do with her family, and said that she was whisked away with the guy to Vermont. Sandy said that she wanted to hear it from Trish herself, and since Ashley was the last person that saw her, she wanted to continue chatting. For the rest of May and June, Ashley strung Sandy along. Then, in their final chat, Ashley told Sandy via phone call, "If you file a missing persons report, you'll never see your granddaughter again." Sandy heard the iciness in her tone and deemed this was a threat and called the police. And she reported Trish missing on July 6, 2018. In the desperate search for Trish, the family cut off Trish's disability checks in an attempt to get Trish to surface again. But she didn't, and the family feared for the worst. On August 29, 2018, the case was made public. The police told the public that this case was urgent and they suspected foul play. Then, just a week later, police located some crates out of Grant's Pond. Sandy was asked for her DNA, which she provided. 3 months later, in January 2019, the most devastating news had came. Police discovered Trish's dismembered remains in the washer and dryer unit in September, and Sandy's DNA confirmed it. Police are looking at Doug and Ashley as possible suspects. It wasn't just because she stayed with the couple, it was because of both of their long criminal histories. And there was some scary info given by their friends. Specifically, Angela and Kayla. Kayla saw the couple abuse Trish, and Angela helped Ashley move out a washer and dryer she suddenly wanted to get rid of. Coincidence? I think not. Then, after this information was told to the police, both of the friends' cars were lit on fire. Both were arsons, which was confirmed by the fire marshal. Unfortunately, Trish Haynes' case is still unsolved for now. This is Roberta Miller, or commonly known as Bobbie. She was described as tough and a hard worker. She was a bit mischievous and clever, especially when it came to her dad and outsmarting his rules. So her death truly shocked the small Guilford community and left a wave of uncertainty. 2 days prior to the announcement of her death, Bobbie was working around the house, constructing window boxes. Bobbie had spoken to her kids and mother on that Sunday as well. The neighborhood that she was in wasn't a trick-or-treat hotspot, so Bobbie settled in on Halloween night. It was sometime that evening or the next day when Bobbie and her dog were killed in the home. Bobbie's daughter, Jennifer, said that her mom was procrastinating an assignment that was due Sunday night on Halloween, but it was never submitted, suggesting that Bobbie was killed before she finished it. When the police arrived and examined the crime scene, Bobbie had been shot with a shotgun twice. It was definitely overkill because the first shot was to the face, and that most likely killed her immediately. The second shot was to the back of her head. Also, Bobbie's yellow lab, Sport, was shot twice as well. This is where it kinda gets confusing. There was no sign of forced entry, which meant either she knew the killer and let him in willingly, but how do you conceal a shotgun? It's also a possibility that the killer had a key to the house, or she could have left some doors unlocked. What's crazier is that Bobbie had neighbors, and none of them heard anything, so the killer got away unnoticed. Sadly, she wasn't found until the afternoon of the next day, and her tragic death was broadcasted November 2nd. Although her case did receive media coverage, Bobbie's case still remains unsolved, but her family and children tell her story and hope that one day they'll get closure. This is Kaysera Places. She was an 18-year-old Indigenous woman who used her voice to advocate for Indigenous people's rights. In days just before her murder, she recorded how cruel law enforcement beat her 15-year-old brother, leading her family to believe that something corrupt went on. Kaysera was living with her grandmother, Yolanda Fraser, in Hardin, Montana, but on that particular night, she didn't return home. Despite Yolanda reaching out to the police and explaining how it was unlike Kaysera not to return home, no police report or missing persons report was filed. Also, no alert was issued. Basically, the police told Yolanda to search on her own. The next day, on August 25th, Kaysera's aunt tries to report her missing, but was told there was a mandatory waiting period before police would file a report, which is not a Montana law. And then, just mere days later, on August 29th, Kaysera's body was discovered by a jogger. She was found lying face down in a pile of tree trimmings behind some residential homes. But due to the police's blatant negligence, the family wasn't notified till September 11th. And what's even sadder is that the autopsy shown she had been dead since August 26th, just a day after they tried to file a police report. And I can say that it doesn't get any worse, but it does. The family doesn't even know how she died, and neither does the police. And the one to blame is the county coroner, who decided to cremate her even though her family said no, meaning that all the evidence that was on her body was completely burned. And another thing, Kaysera's cell phone was took at the crime scene, and it hasn't been seen since. This could be the way that the police are trying to silence her, because in that phone, it holds a video of them beating on her brother. I hate to say it, but Kaysera's case may never be solved due to the lack of effort and carelessness of law enforcement.